What's up my bro, Tundrum here, back with another video, and today I'm going to be showing you my Jori En Ruin Diver Storm-based EDH deck. Now when I say Storm, what I mean is tons of small instants and sorcery spells that generate card advantage. We're not actually running any Storm cards, but it works similar to how a modern Storm deck would. So pretty much what we do is, earlier on we want to be casting lots of small cantrip type spells, sifting through our deck. We then hopefully got stuff like counter spells to slow our opponents down. Then we want to drop a Jori, and then normally by about turn 3ish, we're going to be wanting to have a turn where we cast a lot of smaller spells and sift through our deck. This is how most games turn out. Then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to play a game-winning huge spell or a huge spell that takes advantage of the game, something like an extra turn spell or a really good board wipe, because our deck has almost no creatures. A board wipe will just decimate our opponents. Or what we're going to want to do is drop one of our win condition type cards, which is stuff like Aetherflux Reservoir, Talrand, which benefit us for casting tons of instants and sorcery spells, and then cast all these little cantrips and have a turn where we cast 4-5 spells and just win the game from there. Sounds complex, but the deck is relatively simple. So I'm going to split it into 5 sections. Section 1 is just your regular instant and sorcery spells, stuff for sort of storm-based cards. Section 2 is interaction and protection, so stuff that interacts with our opponents and protects our stuff, even though we don't really have much to protect. Section 3 is utility and ramp, so that's ramp cards, things like Soul Ring, Wayfarer's Bauble, and utility things like game-winning spells like extra turn stuff, shooters, those type of cards. And then we have our win conditions. These cards don't really do anything else other than just kind of help us win the game once we play them. So, without further ado, let's get into it by looking at the commander, Jori En Ruin Diver. Now, Jori En Ruin Diver, it's a 3 mana 2/3 legendary creature merfolk wizard, and it says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, draw a card. That is all the card reads, but it can actually get us so much value. This almost always essentially just gives us an extra card on our turn, and often we'll actually be casting 2 spells on one of our opponent's turns as well. So often this can get us a 2 or even 3 card benefit every table rotation, and it will almost always be giving us 1. So this really helps us storm off, play lots of small spells and sift through our deck, and turn these cantrip cards, which are already some nice card filtering and card advantage, into incredible card advantage. But no, let's get into section 2, cantrips. So first up we've got Faithless Looting. Really simple, it's a 1 mana sorcery that draws us 2 cards, then we discard 2 cards. We can also flashback it for 3 mana. So this is really viable, nice storm card, helps us sift through our deck, fills up our graveyard. Lots of our win cons rely on instants and sorceries in our graveyard, so this is really solid. We've got Spell Pierce. This should actually probably be in the interaction section. 1 mana instant that counters target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. This is often quite nice to play on an enemy turn. This combined with an instant cantrip will just get us an extra turn card off Jori, which is really solid. We have Opt. Opt, really nice. 1 mana scry 1 draw a card, which would probably already be running, but it's also at instant speed, so it can let us get that extra card on their turn as well. Dizzy Spell, we can cast it as a 1 mana instant to give target creature -3/-0 until end of turn, which isn't that bad on its own, but it also has Transmute, which can, if we pay the cost, we get any 1-drop out of our deck, and we have quite a few viable 1-drop instants. Or often what we'll do is we'll transmute it to get one of our other 1-drop tutors to then tutor what we want. Portent, really nice. It looks at the top 3 cards of target player's library. You can either put them back on top of in any order or shuffle that deck, and we draw a card at next turn's upkeep. This can really make it so our opponents can have a hard time drawing what they need, or make it so we can draw exactly what we need. And it also draws a card, so reasonable cantrip. Brainstorm, one of the best cantrips. 1 mana draws 3 cards, then puts 2 cards from our hand on top of our library. We have lots of shuffle effects to get rid of the 2 bad cards we don't want. And we also have a couple miracle cards that if we can brainstorm into one of those miracle cards, almost just win the game. Serum Visions, simple but effective cantrip. 1 mana draws a card and scries 2. Visions of Beyond, 1 mana instant that draws us a card. It is an instant, which is really good. But if a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, we get to draw 3 times that much, 3 cards, which is so viable. We often get 20 cards in our deck with all these little instants and sorceries we're casting, so this can generate us a lot of value. Quicken, 1 mana instant that draws a card. We might even just be running a spell like that just because the instant is so viable, being able to draw not just on the extra card, not just on your turn off Jori, but on an enemy's turn as well. And it also says the next sorcery card you cast this turn can be cast as though it had flash. So if we have Jori on the field, we play Quicken, we can then play one of our sorcery cantrips like Serum Visions, and then on their turn, we've just drawn 3 cards, which is really good. We are, of course, spending cards, but we're also casting instants and sorcery spells and thinning out our deck, because the whole point of cantrips like this as well is it's essentially every time you cast it, it's 1 card less in your deck. And so you're more likely to draw your bomb, if you know what I mean. Lightning Bolt, 1 mana, 3 damage to anything, premium removal, can also help finish off an opponent if they're on low life. Gamble, gets any card from our library into our hand, but we do have to discard a card at random. Normally, that discard won't hit the card we really need. If it does, it's still worth the risk. It's normally about a 1 in 5, 1 in 6 chance. It's also a 1-drop sorcery, so that's nice to trigger Jori. And discarding a card, there are lots of things that benefit us from fueling a graveyard, so that's not actually too bad either. Preordain, one of the best cantrips of all time. Scry 2, then draw a card. Very strong. Sleight of Hand, another nice cantrip. Gets us 1 card out of our top 2. Mystical Tutor, 1 mana instant tutor that gets any instant or sorcery on top of our deck. Very viable. Pyretic Ritual, 2 mana, adds triple red, makes it really easy to Stormwolf, cast 2 or more spells in our turn, really viable with our win conditions, giving us mana as well as casting a card, really solid. Is It Charm can counter stuff, destroy small threats, and it can also draw 2 cards then discard 2 cards. Can be used in so many situations to destroy a threat, interact with our opponent, or help us Stormwolf. None of the modes are too powerful on their own, but put them all into 1 card and give it that versatility, it is very strong. Desperate Ritual, essentially Pyretic Ritual, except it can also splice onto an Arcane. And we do actually have, I think, 2 Arcanes in this deck, so this can actually potentially generate us a little bit of extra value. Frantic Search, 3 mana instant that draws 2 cards. We then discard 2 cards and untap up to 3 lands. So this is essentially a Faithless Looting that costs 0, and we can also sometimes benefit on mana if we have one of our lands that tap for 2. So this is very, very strong, very nice Storm card, and helps us filter through our deck. Pieces of the Puzzle, insanely strong card. It reveals the top 5 cards of our library, and we get any 2 instants or sorcery cards from among them into our hand, and the rest go into our graveyard as well. This is nice, it's casting a spell, fueling up our graveyard, and pretty much almost all of our deck is instants or sorceries. We only have about 12 cards that aren't, so this is very close to 3 mana. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck, put 2 of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. It is very strong, very nice card. Windfall helps keep fueling our storm if we run out of things in our hand. Can generate us card advantage if our opponents have a huge hand. Just a pretty good card in EDH in general. Drawn from Dreams gets the top 7 cards of our deck, and we get any 2 cards from among them into our hand. This is very, very strong. So much card selection, definitely worth the include. Bond of Insight makes everyone mill 4 cards, and then we get 2 instant or sorcery cards from our graveyard back to our hand. This can be so viable, getting 2 of our best cards we need from our graveyard back to our hand. Really helps us storm off, lets us replay a huge game-winning spell or a board wipe. Very viable card. Pour over pages, draws 3 cards, then untaps up to 2 lands, and then discard a card. This is nice, gives us card selection from 3 cards, discards the worst card in our hand, and really only costs 2 mana. And if we have our double lands, it'll cost even less. Very nice card. Treasure Cruise, normally this will just be a 1 mana draw 3 cards. In the early turns it's not, but anything really after turn 4 or 5, it is often just 1 mana draw 3 cards. Very strong card, insane. And then finally we have Dig Through Time, which is a Drawn Through Dreams, except it costs 8, And, oh no, I guess not Compiro. So it's an 8 mana instant with Delve. And it says, look at the top 7 cards of your library, put 2 into your hand, the rest on the bottom. Very nice. This will often just be costing 2 mana. Very viable card. And that's kind of, these are the main cards we're normally going to be storming off with. So many turns we can just go, because all our cantrips draw another card as well, and often have card advantage if we have Jori. We can just go cantrip into like a dig through time type card, or anything. It's just very, very, this section just goes off. You can have so many turns where you just go card, 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 and it will just be game changing. Now we're on to the interaction and protection section. First up in the section, we have Spell Snare. 1 mana instant, counters target spell with CMC 2. Very viable. So many things are 2. It's a 1 mana instant. I just really like it. Condescend. 1 mana and an X. Counter target spell unless its controller pays X. And we get to scry 2. What I often actually find myself doing with this card is I have, let's say, an instant to play on the enemy turn, and then I have nothing else to do, but I want to trigger Jori. I'll often just cast this with X equals 0, so then it becomes a scry 2 draw card, essentially, which is actually alright on its own, so it's also viable in that aspect as well. Or I sometimes use it as a storm card just for the 1 mana scry 2, and most of all, it is a viable counter spell. Arcane Denial, counters a spell, they draw 2 cards, you draw 1. It is giving your enemy a little bit of card advantage, but it is a very nice value counterspell. Just plain old counterspell, definitely worth the include in any blue deck. 2 mana, counters anything. Muddle the Mixture, counters target instant or sorcery spell, and it also has Transmute, which gets us any 2-drop we want out of our deck, which is very, very, very strong. Unwind. 3 mana, counters target non-creature spell, and we untap up to 3 lands. This is so good. Essentially costs nothing. Very, very good. Disallow, counters target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. This can be really good. It can stop an enemy comboing off with infinite abilities or something, or stopping a certain ability from triggering, as well as also being a regular counter spell. Rewind, 4 mana, counters any spell, and we untap up to 4 lands. This is just like Unwind, both very, very strong cards, very, very good. Storm's Wrath, 4 mana, deals 4 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. This, as we have so few creatures, this will often just decimate our opponent's boards. Very good. Chain Reaction, 4 mana, deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. Most of the time, this is just an all-out board wipe. We don't really have any creatures, so this will just decimate our opponents. Misdirection, 5 mana instant, changes the target of a spell with a single target, or we can exile a blue card from a hand rather than pay its mana cost. Very viable card, can generate us a lot of value, and really trick out our opponents as well. River's Rebuke, returns all non-land permanents target player owns to their hand. This decimates a certain opponent, makes it very hard for them to come back, and sets them behind. This is really good to play on someone who's in a game-winning position. For example, they played an Expropriate and you've still managed to survive. You just play this and it will destroy them. All is Dust. Everyone sacrifices all coloured permanents he or she controls. This doesn't hit artifacts, but in our deck, pretty much everything we've got, I think, yeah, like 3-4 creatures in the whole deck, maybe 5. And then outside of that, we just have artifacts, which are colourless. So this is really a one-sided board wipe just for our opponents. And we have Blasphemous Act. 9 mana, but it costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the field. 13 damage to each creature. Board wipes everything other than the very, very, very biggest of creatures. Now we're on to Section 3, Utility and Ramp. So first up, we've got Baral, Chief of Compliance. 2 mana, 1/3, makes all our instants and sorceries cost 1 less, and can also get us a little bit of card selection if we cast a counterspell. Solid card. Wayfarer's Bauble, not the best ramp card, but it's good when we're in blue-red, which has very extra access to ramp, so this is a nice little ramp piece. Soul Ring, auto-include, not much more to say. Silvermere, 2 mana, 1/1 that ramps us, nice card. Prismatic Lens, 2 mana artifact, taps for colourless, and can tap for 1 mana of any colour if we pay an extra 1. Merchant Scroll gets any blue instant out of our deck and puts it into our hand. Most of our big game-winning spells are blue instants. It doesn't get any of our boardwipes, but outside of that, this will hit most of the things we want. Mindstone, nice little ramp card that can also draw us a card later on if we don't need it. Izzet Signet, solid ramp. Hull Breacher, it doesn't really fit the deck because it's a creature, but if you're not running Hull Breacher in your deck, what are you running? It's just so good in EDH right now. 3 mana, 3/2 flash. Whenever an opponent would draw a card except the first one, they draw on each of their draw steps. Instead, you create a treasure token. This is really nice. It can also give us tons of mana so we can storm off in a future turn. And it's flash, so it can also help trigger Jori En's draw ability. Wavebreak Hippocamp, 3 mana, 2/2, and whenever we cast our first spell during each opponent's turn, draw a card. This is almost as good as Jori En, if not better. Drawing a card whenever we cast something on our opponent's turn, well, our first card on each of their turn, can generate so much value. Long-term plans, 3 mana instant gets any card from our deck and puts it into our library third from the top. Not insane shooter, but will give us, let's say we want to do a bit more card draw in the next turn or so, will get us, let's say, a board wipe we might want in a few turns, or a game-winning bomb, that sort of thing. So it is not a nice tutor. Part the Water Veil, extra turn spell, really, pretty much any extra turn spell is good. It's only a 6-drop, which isn't too bad for an extra turn. And if we also invest 9 mana into it, we get one of our lands into a 6/6, which is even stronger. Invert Invent. Invert switches the power of up to 2 target creatures, power and toughness of up to 2 target creatures. This can destroy things with 0 power, just boom, gone. And it can also really trick up our opponents and let us win in combat. But the main reason, and it's a 1 mana instant, so often triggers Jori, and we can use it to storm. But the main reason we're running it is Invent, which is 6 mana, gets our library an instant and a sorcery card and put them into our hands. Nice little tutor card. Spell Twine, 6 mana sorcery, exiles target instant or sorcery card from our graveyard, and target instant and sorcery card from our opponent's graveyard, and we get to cast copies of both of those cards. This is so strong, replaying the best instance or sorcery you've cast this game, and the best instance and sorcery any opponent has cast this game, is so good. I reckon this would be viable even if it was 8 mana. It's so much value for 6 mana. This will often get us 12, 13, 15 mana worth of value. Very good. Temporal Mastery. This is the miracle card I was talking about. 7 mana for an extra turn, which isn't too bad, but the main thing is miracle for 2 mana. So we draw this on our turn, suddenly we've just got an extra turn, boom, 2 mana for an extra turn. Very good. Firemind's Foresight, 7 mana, and gets out of our library an instant with CMC 3, 2, and 1. This has so much versatility, gets exactly what we need. Very nice card. And finally, we have Epic Experiment. X, a blue and a red for a sorcery, and it says exile the top X cards of your library. For each instant and sorcery card with converted mana cost X or less from among them, you may cast this card without paying its mana cost. Then put all cards exiled this way that weren't cast into your graveyard. So ideally you want to have this around X equals 6 or more, so it's normally about an 8 mana card, which is quite pricey. But that's not too hard to reach. And if you cast it, let's say at X equals 6, that's essentially getting the top 6 cards of your library, essentially drawing them and casting all of them for free. Very strong game-winning card if you can cast it later on. And so now we're on to our final section. Our final section, which is, well no, we've also got mana base, but that's not really a section. Final section, we've got bombs and game-winning cards. So first up we have Thing in the Ice. 2 mana 0/4 creature horror with Defender, and it enters with 4 ice counters. And whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell out, remove an ice counter. So often we'll be able to trigger this the next turn, or just maybe in 2 turns' time. And then once it runs out of ice counters, it turns into a 7/8 Kraken Horror that returns all non-horror creatures to their owner's hand. If you transform this, this is almost a board wipe. Returning to hand isn't quite a board wipe, but it essentially decimates our opponent's board and gives us a huge 7/8. So this is essentially 2 mana that within a turn or two will transform into that beast, board wipe your opponents, that's like the best creature in the game if it's 2 mana. And even if they do remove it, you've essentially paid 2 mana to make them waste probably a viable removal spell. Very, 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 very strong card. Gutter Snipe, 3 mana 2/2 Goblin Shaman, and whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, it hits all our opponents for 2. So we play this, and normally about 10 to 15 instant or sorcery spells later, it would have killed our enemies. This seems like a lot, but really, this is quite viable. You do it the next turn, that's often 3 or 4 spells you cast, that's 8 damage to each of your opponents. And so either it's going to kill them in 2 or 3 turns, or they're going to have to deal with it, which once again, using a viable removal spell on a 2/2 is pretty good for you. We then have Sentinel Tower. Whenever an instant or sorcery spell is cast during our turn, Sentinel Tower deals damage to any target equal to 1, plus the number of instants or sorcery spells cast before that spell this turn. So this essentially says first instance or sorcery spell we cast does 1 damage, second does 2, third does 3, fourth does 4, fifth does 5. So if we can cast 5 or 6 spells after this, we've just done like 18 damage. That's very, very viable. More than 18, 21 damage actually. Very viable. If we can cast 7 or 8 spells, this is just going to be killing our opponent. It also does a damage to any target, so it can deal with any major threats on the enemy's board, any creatures. And if our enemy tries to interact with this, it also does damage as well, because it counts for the spells they cast as well. Very good. Aether Flux Reservoir. Whenever we cast a spell, we gain 1 life for each spell we've cast this turn. Very nice. And then we can also pay 50 life to deal 50 damage to any target. So we cast this on turn 4, let's say. We've got a Jori on the field and maybe, let's say, Ramp Piece. I don't know. Then we're still on, let's say, 35 life. Then next turn we play 3, 4, or 5 instant or sorcery spells. Suddenly we're on 50 life and we can already just kill someone. And then the next turn we go up to 70. This is a very, very good win con. Even if it didn't have the pay 50 life, we might still be running it because of all the life we'd gain off it. We have Tal'Ran Sky Summoner, 4 mana 2/2 legendary creature Merfolk Wizard. And whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, we get a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. This is really, really strong. 3 or 4 instants and sorceries, and suddenly you have a huge swarm in the air that'll kill for your opponents in a couple of turns. Very nice game-winning card. Docent of Perfection, 5 mana 5/4 flying, which is a huge threat on its own. And it says whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 wizard. Then if we control 3 or more wizards, and our commander is also a wizard, so that also counts towards this as well, it transforms into a 6/5 flying Eldrazi insect that still has that create a 1/1 blue human wizard whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, which is game winning on its own, and it gives all our wizards 2/1 and flying. So it turns our commander into a 4/5 flying. All these little 1/1s we've made into 3/2 flyings, and still makes 3/2 flyings whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell. Very nice, and if this stays around for a turbo, if you can untap with this on your side of the field, you'll often be winning the game pretty soon. Rise from the Tides. This is a 6 mana sorcery that gets us a 2/2 black zombie for each instant and sorcery in our graveyard. Normally by turn 6, that'll be at least 7 or 8. So not always, but it will normally be at least 5. Even if you're just casting this for 5, that's 10 power you've made for 6 mana. But often, if this is late game, this will be getting 13 or 14 zombies, which for a 6 mana card, and they're all individual as well, that's pretty strong. Really the only way to deal with this if it resolves is a board wipe. Very good game-winning card. And finally, we have Blatant Thievery. This is essentially a 7 mana expropriate without the extra turn. Gains control of a permanent each opponent controls. So this gets the best thing off each of their boards, and will just, all of them will likely be pretty viable threats and just kill off our opponents. Also, sometimes we'll even just steal lands off this. It will almost always have really viable targets. Gaining control of 3 things for 7 mana is really good. Even in a 1v1, it's still not useless. 7 mana to gain control is still just playable. Now we're on to the mana base. In the mana base, just running what you'd expect. Command Tower, Path of Ancestry. Pretty much all our creatures are wizards, so this is essentially enters tapped, Taps for either of our colours, and whenever we cast a creature with it, scry 1. Sulphur Falls, nice fixing. Wandering Fumarole, nice fixing and can turn into a 1/4 that can become a 4/1. Is It Boilerworks, really nice with our untap effects. Makes it so we can always hit our lands, nice land. Swiftwater Cliffs, colour fixing, gains us some life. Is It Guildgate, colour fixing. Highland Lake, colour fixing. Memorial to War, enters taps for red and can destroy really problematic lands. Spinerock Knoll, enters taps for red and can cast us something really big later on. Forgotten Caves, land that also has cycling. Desolate Lighthouse, can draw us a card and discard a card, help us get a little bit of value if we don't have anything else to do. Isolated Watchtower, really nice land with a nice ability that can ramp us and scry. Evolving Wilds, colour fixing, does enter tapped. Grixis Panorama, taps for a colourless, and we can also get a mountain or an island out of it later on. And then the rest of the deck, we've just got your respective basic lands. I actually think I'm running a few too many mountains here. I need to swap a few out. But outside of that, that's the main deck for you. Hope you like my deck. I have a lot of success with this deck. It's definitely not at the CDH level, but it's a pretty strong regular deck. I'd say it's at least a 6.5, if not a 7. Some games it even performs like a 7.5 or 8. Like I had a game where it was turn 1 Brainstorm, turn 2 Temporal Mastery, turn 3 play a bunch of cantrips, turn 4 board wipe, destroy all our opponents, turn 5 I believe a Telrand, combo with a cantrip, and then turn 6 create about 10 drakes. So it can be very, very strong. And all those were reversed to turn as well because of the extra turn. But it can be very, very strong. Yeah, it's not insane, but it is quite a strong deck. I really enjoyed playing it. It's a very fun deck. And I hope if you guys decide to make it, you will too. And yeah, guys, that concludes the video. Hope you like the deck. If you want to see more from me, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And I hope to see you next time.